Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to connect with someone or something across the boundaries of time and space? In a world where silence speaks louder than words, the bond between a mute man and an alien being is formed in the most unexpected of ways. This is not a typical story of love or rescue, it's a tale of deep connection, silent understanding, and the kind of love that transcends worlds. Join me as we explore a journey that will leave you questioning what it truly means to be seen, to be heard, and to find connection in the most unlikely places. Don't forget to like, share, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about love beyond the stars? The day begins slowly, like the rise of a forgotten star on the horizon. The sun is setting, casting an eerie amber glow across the quiet, sleepy town. Elisa, a mute man in his 30s, resides in a modest apartment on the top floor of an old building that groans with the weight of years. His home is small, sparse, and devoid of any color other than the gray that clings to the walls like a memory of past lives. Each morning, Elisa wakes up to the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks of the window, the city outside seemingly unaware of his existence. There's a certain rhythm to his life routine, mechanical, almost like an ancient ritual. He rises from his bed in the dim light of the morning, his feet landing softly on the wooden floor. Every action is deliberate, practiced, like a performer executing a script he knows all too well. He makes breakfast in silence, the clinking of utensils the only sound that fills the air. His movements are methodical, precise. No words are spoken, there is no need. The silence in his world is comforting, yet oppressive. As the clock ticks away, Elisa begins his day, heading out the door to a life as a cleaner in a laboratory, a place where the air is sterile, and the light feels cold. The laboratory, tucked away in the far corner of the town, houses the secrets of the universe that no one else seems to care about. It's a place where creatures from faraway worlds are studied, but Elisa never gets to witness the wonders that lie hidden behind thick glass walls. To him, the lab is just another place that has no room for him. His job is simple, clean, and stay out of sight. People pass him by without a glance, their voices echoing like distant whispers. They speak to each other, to the world, but they never speak to him. Elisa doesn't mind the silence, it has become his closest companion, even if it feels like a cage at times. He knows that his silence is his own prison, one that no one else can understand. His world is a place where words do not exist, where meaning is conveyed through gestures, and still, no one truly listens. At night, when the stars are distant and cold above him, Elisa sits alone in the dim light of his apartment. The quiet wraps itself around him like a heavy cloak. The silence is no longer soothing, it has become suffocating. Elisa's eyes wander to the window, staring out into the abyss of the darkening sky. There's something missing, something that he can't touch, can't name. It stirs deep within him, a longing, an aching for something more, something beyond the stillness of his existence. It's as though he is meant to be part of something greater, something unspoken, but the world around him remains silent to his cries. Every night, he feels the pull of this yearning, but it remains distant, unreachable, a whisper on the edge of his mind, like a dream he can almost remember. Elisa wonders if the world outside knows this feeling, if anyone else has ever felt the same. But for now, all he can do is wait, sit in the quiet, and hope that one day, the silence will speak. The laboratory is a place of cold, clinical precision. The walls hum with a low buzz of fluorescent lights, casting an almost ghostly glow over everything in sight. Elisa's footsteps echo in the sterile hallways, the sound sharp and lonely against the hum of the machines. This is his world, a place of wires, glass, and isolation. Here, the air always feels thin, almost like it's been sucked of any warmth or emotion, leaving behind only the chill of detachment. Today, Something different stirs in the lab, something that breaks the monotony. Elisa is given a task he's never had before to clean the restricted area, the space where they keep their most special research subjects. His heart beats a little faster, a sense of foreboding creeping over him as he pushes open the heavy door. The room inside is dimly lit, shadows flickering in the corners like whispers of the unknown. In the center of the room, enclosed within thick, transparent glass, lies Ira, a creature unlike anything Elisa has ever seen. She's a female, though her features are not human. Her skin shimmers with an iridescent sheen, shifting between hues of silver, blue, and green, like the surface of a calm sea under the moonlight. Her eyes, vast and dark, reflect the lights above her, almost as if they carry the mysteries of distant stars. The air around her seems to pulse with an invisible energy, her presence powerful and yet fragile, as if she is the very embodiment of something ancient and unknown. Elisa stops in his tracks. His breath catches, and for a moment, he forgets to move. There is something about Ira, something that calls to him, a pull he cannot explain. Her gaze meets his, and time seems to slow. Her eyes are full of something Elisa recognizes, trapped in a world not her own, held captive by forces beyond her control. Her silent plea, the pain of isolation, is mirrored in the depths of his own being. He knows this feeling, this yearning to escape the invisible prison that has kept him caged for so long. In that moment, a strange connection forms between them, unspoken but undeniable. Elisa cannot communicate through words he has never been able to, but it's as if Ira's eyes speak a language he understands, a language that transcends vocal sounds. In her gaze, Elisa sees not just an alien creature, but a kindred spirit, someone who, like him, is lost in a strange world, forced to endure a life of silence and confinement. Every time Elisa walks past Ira's tank to clean, they exchange a glance, brief but meaningful. It's a wordless conversation, a language made of shared understanding and silent empathy. Ira's presence is more than just an experiment for Elisa, it is a revelation. She is not just a subject to be studied, she is a reflection of everything he's ever felt but could never express. There is no need for words. Every time they lock eyes, Elisa feels a deeper bond forming, a bond that speaks of something ancient, something that has always existed between them, even if they cannot yet fully understand it. As days pass, their silent interactions grow more intense. Ira's eyes seem to follow Elisa's movements, watching him as if waiting, hoping. And Elisa, in turn, becomes more attuned to her presence, to the subtle shifts in her posture, the slight flickers of emotion that dance across her face. She is more than just a captive alien, she is a being full of life, a spirit that refuses to be silenced, much like him. Each passing day deepens their bond, the invisible thread between them growing stronger. Elisa begins to realize that Ira is not only trapped physically in this strange world, she is also trapped emotionally, cut off from her own kind, from her own home. And in that, Elisa understands her loneliness all too well. He can no longer ignore the sense of longing that stirs deep within him. It is a longing for freedom, for connection, for something more than the silence that fills his life. But despite their silent communication, the distance between them remains vast, a chasm too wide to cross. Elisa cannot break Ira free from her cage, and she cannot escape the lab. They are two lost souls, bound by fate, unable to bridge the space that separates them, trapped in their own worlds of isolation. As the days stretch on, Elisa's routine continues, the monotonous hours in the lab dragging by with the same cold sterility. Yet, something has shifted within him, an undercurrent of something unspoken, something that feels as though it has always existed but has only now come to the surface. The lab, once a place of detachment and indifference, has become a place where his thoughts wander to Ira more and more. His daily tasks, though simple and repetitive, no longer seem as significant. The world around him blurs as he finds himself drawn to the one being who, like him, exists in a cage of silence. Each day, Elisa spends more time in the observation room, cleaning the spaces near Ira's tank, but it's no longer just a task. He watches her intently. There is something about the way Ira moves, the way she reacts to the world around her, that captures his attention. At first, it was the shimmer of her skin, the subtle shifts of light across her form, but as time goes on, Elisa begins to notice something far more profound: Ira's eyes. Those dark, endless eyes, once so distant, now carry a depth of emotion, a flicker of consciousness that Elisa recognizes. She is not just a captive alien, a subject of study. She is a living being, full of thoughts, feelings, and awareness. Elisa's heart tightens with this realization. Despite her otherworldly appearance, Ira is not so different from him. She feels, she hopes, and perhaps, like him, she yearns for something more than this sterile existence. Slowly, over time, Elisa begins to experiment with subtle ways of communicating: small gestures, fleeting glances, the language of the heart that transcends words. He starts by leaving her small offerings of food, a silent gesture of care. Each day, he places a tray of sustenance at the edge of her enclosure, his eyes meeting hers as he does so. He doesn't say a word he doesn't need to, but his actions speak volumes. He watches as she eats, her movements slow and deliberate, almost cautious at first. But with each passing day, she seems more at ease, her gaze softening when it meets his. Slowly, the distance between them narrows. Despite the physical barrier, Elisa knows that Ira is aware of him in ways that others are not. There is a quiet understanding between them, as if their souls have found each other in the vastness of silence. Ira, who had once appeared so alien, now seems less distant. Elisa begins to sense the quiet pain that lingers in her gaze. She is not just a prisoner of the lab, but a prisoner of her own existence, a being displaced in a world not her own. One day, as Elisa quietly observes her from the shadows, he sees a flicker of something in Ira's eyes, a fleeting moment of recognition. It's subtle, but unmistakable. She's learned to expect him, to wait for his presence. In that brief exchange, Elisa feels something stir deep within him, a connection that no words can express. It is as if they are two sides of the same coin, lost in a world that neither understands. But the real turning point comes late one night, when the lab is deserted, and the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights is the only sound that fills the empty halls. Elisa cannot sleep. The pull of the unspoken bond between him and Ira has become too strong to ignore. He knows that he has to see her, to be near her, to share in the silence that has come to mean so much. He slips out of his apartment and walks back to the lab, moving quietly through the darkened hallways, the shadows his only companions. When Elisa enters the observation room, Ira is still there, waiting. The lights cast long, ethereal shadows over her body, making her look like a figure suspended in time. Elisa approaches the glass tank cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He knows this is dangerous, that he's breaking the rules, but something inside him compels him to go further. He places his hand gently against the cold glass, his breath visible in the chilled air. For a moment, there is nothing, just the sound of his breathing and the distant hum of the machines. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, Ira raises her hand and places it against the glass on the other side. Elisa's pulse quickens. Their hands, separated by the barrier, are connected in that moment, a bond created not by words, but by something deeper, something they both understand. They stand there in silence, locked in an understanding so profound it transcends language, transcends species. The world outside ceases to exist. There is no lab, no experiments, no barriers between them. In that moment, they are two beings, simply existing together, sharing something beyond the confines of their physical forms. It is a moment of pure connection, one that speaks volumes without a single word. As they stand there, separated by glass but united in this quiet bond, Elisa realizes something: he is no longer alone. For the first time, he feels seen, truly seen. Ira's silent presence, her shared longing, fills the empty spaces inside him. In the stillness of the night, amidst the sterile walls of the lab, Elisa finds something he never thought he would: a kindred spirit, lost in the same world, longing for the same thing: freedom. But just as quickly as the moment came, it fades. Ira lowers her hand slowly, her gaze lingering on Elisa for a moment longer. Elisa steps back, his heart heavy with the weight of their connection, knowing that they cannot bridge the chasm that lies between them. The silent bond they share is beautiful, but it is fleeting. The world outside will not allow it to last. The sterile hum of the laboratory seems louder than usual tonight, as if the very walls are echoing with a sense of something unfinished, something left unsaid. The air is thick with tension, oppressive in its stillness. Ira's holding cell, a cold, metal enclosure, sits in the heart of the lab, its thick glass walls keeping her confined, her every movement monitored by unseen eyes. She is no longer just a subject, a mere specimen in a sterile environment. She is a being, a creature with thoughts and feelings that have begun to reach out to Elisa in ways he can no longer ignore. For days, Elisa has been watching Ira from afar, observing her in silence as she remains trapped in her glass prison. He's noticed the subtle changes: the way her eyes seem to carry the weight of a deep, unspoken sorrow, the way she presses her palms against the glass as if trying to feel the warmth of something beyond her reach. She no longer seems like the powerful, untouchable being she first appeared to be. Now, she looks fragile, broken in ways that no one else seems to notice. To Elisa, it's clear that Ira is more than just an alien. She is someone with a mind that longs for freedom, someone who feels the suffocating weight of her captivity as though it were her very skin. As Elisa continues his work in the lab, he can't help but steal glances at Ira. Her silent suffering haunts him. There are moments when he catches her staring at the ceiling, lost in thought, as if she's trying to escape in her mind, to return to a home she'll never see again. And there are other moments when her gaze shifts to him, and for a fleeting second, he sees the desperation in her eyes, a desperate plea for connection, for escape. Her soul calls to him in ways words never could, and Elisa feels a deep stirring in his chest, a desire to help her that he cannot ignore. One evening, after the lab has emptied and only the hum of machines fills the air, Elisa stays behind. He gathers materials from various corners of the lab, pieces of old research, forgotten tools, anything that could help him understand the creature that has so utterly captivated him. He can't just keep watching from a distance anymore. He needs to know more. He needs to understand her, the being behind the glass, the being whose pain mirrors his own. He spends hours poring over notes, data, and the limited information the lab has on Ira. Slowly, the picture begins to form, a picture of not just an alien from another planet, but a sentient being who has known joy, sorrow, and the deep loneliness of being exiled. Her species, it turns out, is not so unlike humans: emotional, intelligent, and deeply connected to their home planets. Ira, Elisa learns, is not just trapped physically in this laboratory, she is also emotionally shackled, unable to return to her home, separated from her kind by the vastness of space and the cold indifference of the people who hold her here. Each new piece of information deepens Elisa's understanding of Ira's situation. She is a being of incredible intellect and power, yet none of that matters in this place. The strength of her mind is irrelevant when faced with the impenetrable walls of her captivity. Ira is alone, alone in a way Elisa knows all too well. He knows the feeling of being isolated, of being trapped in a world where no one sees him, where his silence is a barrier no one can cross. But for Ira, that isolation is magnified 1,000 times over. She is a prisoner not just of the body, but of the soul. The realization hits Elisa hard. Ira is like him, a being who doesn't belong in this world. He can feel her pain, her longing to escape, and he understands it deeply, too deeply. They are both out of place, lost in a world that refuses to understand them. It is this realization that sets something into motion inside Elisa. He knows that he cannot continue to live in this silence, watching Ira suffer as he once suffered. He cannot remain a passive observer. She has become more than just a prisoner in his eyes, she has become a part of him. He begins to form a plan, though he knows it is dangerous, risky, and almost certainly doomed to fail. But the thought of Ira, of her being alone in this world, of her never returning home, drives him forward. Elisa starts collecting everything he can, materials to break into the restricted areas of the lab, old blueprints of the building, information on the lab's security systems. He knows the risks. If he's caught, it will mean the end for both of them. But it doesn't matter anymore. He can't live with the knowledge that he could have helped and chose not to. As he walks through the empty hallways of the lab late at night, a new determination settles into his chest. There is no going back now. Elisa doesn't just want to free Ira. He needs to. For both of them. He needs to break free from the invisible chains that have bound him to this place, just as Ira needs to escape from her prison of glass and steel. They are both prisoners of a system that refuses to acknowledge them, but together, Elisa believes they can change that. The thought of breaking Ira out fills Elisa with a mix of fear and hope. But it is hope that begins to outweigh the fear. He knows the risks, but for the first time, the thought of doing something is better than a silent resignation that has defined his life for so long. Ira's struggle is his struggle, and perhaps, in freeing her, Elisa can also free himself. The night stretches out before him, a thick blanket of silence that smothers the world outside. Elisa sits in the dim light of his apartment, his eyes focused on the page in front of him. The faint hum of the streetlights below seeps through the window, but within his small space, the silence is complete, almost suffocating. The room is bare, the walls closing in around him. His mind is a whirlwind of thoughts, none of them calm, none of them settled. There is only one thing that occupies his every waking moment, Ira. The weight of the plan settles heavily on his shoulders, and he can feel his pulse quicken as he picks up a pencil and begins to sketch out the blueprint. It's a detailed, methodical process, each stroke of the pencil on paper a careful step towards something he can barely imagine. He's prepared for this moment for days, ever since he fully realized what Ira's captivity meant not just for her, but for him as well. They are both trapped, two beings lost in the same world, with the same desire for escape. Elisa's apartment is lit only by the soft glow of a lamp, casting long, shadowy figures across the walls. It's a place of solitude, a place where the echoes of his own silence become too loud, too consuming. But tonight, the silence feels different. There is purpose in it now. The plan unfolds before him, a sequence of movements, of precise actions that he must carry out with unwavering focus. He begins to write down his strategy in a small notebook, the words flowing like a secret language. He knows the lab's layout, every hallway, every locked door, every security checkpoint. He's been here long enough to study it, to learn its rhythms and patterns, to become part of the background that no one notices. This knowledge is his key to unlocking Ira's prison. With every detail he writes, the tension grows thicker. He knows the risks. If he is caught, the consequences will be dire not just for him, but for Ira too. His heart races as he jots down the steps, disabling the security systems, navigating the labyrinth of hallways, reaching Ira's cell unnoticed. Each plan, each movement, must be flawless. There is no room for error. If one thing goes wrong, if one guard notices a movement in the shadows, it will all fall apart. Elisa pauses for a moment, staring at the page. His hand hovers over the next line, trembling slightly. He's made the decision, but the weight of it is almost too much to bear. The notebook is filled with sketches of security systems, diagrams of the lab, and arrows pointing to the exit. But now, in the corner of the page, Elisa writes something else, a simple sentence that brings everything into focus. "I will help you." The words are barely a whisper in the stillness of the room, but they echo louder than any sound he's ever made. His eyes linger on the phrase, the finality of it settling in. This is his promise. He is crossing a line from which there is no return. There is no more waiting, no more silent observation. Ira's freedom will cost him everything: his safety, his anonymity, his silence. But for the first time in his life, Elisa feels alive. He feels the pull of something greater than himself, something that transcends his own fears and doubts. He rises from his chair, pacing the small room, his thoughts racing. The tools he needs are simple, but they are essential. He's already gathered what he can: lockpicks, old wires, tools he knows the lab would never miss. He grabs a backpack and begins to stuff it with the supplies: a flashlight, a small wrench, a makeshift device to disable the cameras. These are not professional tools, but they will have to do. He is a man of silence, of small gestures, not a man of grand plans or big acts. But tonight, he must become something else. Tonight, he must be the one to act. With the bag packed, Elisa stands still, letting the weight of the moment wash over him. There is no going back. He looks at the clock: late enough that the lab will be deserted, but early enough that he will have the cover of darkness. Time is both his ally and his enemy. He picks up the notebook again, flipping through the pages. He knows every step by heart now. He knows the risks, but he also knows the urgency. Ira's time is running out. If he doesn't act soon, the lab will move her again, take her somewhere even more secure, and he will lose his chance to set her free. His heart races as he imagines her trapped in that glass cage, her eyes always searching for something, someone. He wonders if she knows that he will try to save her. Does she feel it? Does she know that someone who understands her pain will risk everything to set her free? As he straps the backpack over his shoulder, he pauses for a moment, his gaze falling on the window. The night sky stretches out before him, vast and endless, a reminder of the freedom Ira longs for, the freedom he will give her. He is ready. The path ahead is fraught with danger, but it is a path he must walk. With one last glance at the empty room, Elisa steps into the night, his resolve as unyielding as the silence that has always surrounded him. The lab is quiet, too quiet. The usual hum of machines and the flicker of fluorescent lights are replaced by an eerie stillness. Elisa slips through the darkened hallways, his every step calculated, silent. The weight of the moment presses on him. This is it. There's no turning back now. He moves through the shadows, staying low, avoiding the security cameras and patrolling guards. The lab, usually bustling with activity, is now abandoned, the empty hallways stretching out like a maze of concrete and steel. Elisa's heart beats loudly in his chest, but he suppresses the anxiety, focusing only on the task ahead. The observation room looms in front of him, Ira's prison, the glass tank where she's been held for so long. He pauses outside the door, listening for any sound, for any sign of movement. The world feels suspended, as though time itself is holding its breath. With a quick motion, Elisa pulls out the tools from his bag, the lockpick clicking softly as he works on the door. His hands are steady despite the tension swirling inside him. Finally, the door clicks open, and Elisa slips inside. His gaze immediately finds Ira. She's sitting in the corner, her eyes closed as though she's been waiting, feeling his presence long before he stepped inside. Her skin glows faintly in the dim light, shimmering like the moon's reflection on the surface of water. For a moment, Elisa simply watches her, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. She looks so fragile, so trapped. Elisa approaches her slowly, quietly. When Ira opens her eyes, their gazes lock a deep, unspoken understanding passing between them. Without words, they communicate everything: the pain, the longing, the shared sense of isolation. Ira stands, her movements graceful yet cautious, as if uncertain that this moment is real. Without hesitation, Elisa reaches for the lock to Ira's enclosure. As the mechanism clicks open, Ira steps forward, her bare feet softly touching the cold floor. She looks at Elisa, her eyes filled with trust and gratitude, emotions Elisa has never seen so clearly before. In this moment, they are not just captor and captive, but two souls bound together by the same desire: freedom. They stand in the room together, silent but connected in ways words could never capture. Ira steps closer, her presence surrounding him with a sense of warmth that is both comforting and otherworldly. Neither of them speaks. The bond between them is stronger than any spoken words, stronger than the walls that have separated them for so long. But just as they are about to leave, the sharp sound of footsteps echoes through the hallway. Elisa's heart skips a beat. The security guards. They've been discovered. Panic surges through Elisa as he grabs Ira's hand, pulling her into the shadows. They move quickly, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls as they race toward the exit. The lab is a maze of corridors, and every corner feels like a new obstacle, a new chance to be caught. The sound of alarms blares in the distance, too loud, too close. Ira's breathing is steady, but Elisa can sense her unease. They have to move faster. He leads the way, heart pounding in his chest, as they round the corner and head toward the emergency exit. Suddenly, the hallway lights flicker, casting long, sinister shadows across their path. As they near the exit, a group of guards appears, blocking their way. Elisa freezes for a split second, but Ira's eyes flashed with determination. Without warning, she raises her hand, and the air around them shifts. A sudden, invisible force ripples outward, knocking the guards off their feet, sending them crashing into the walls. They are stunned, disoriented, but it's enough for Elisa and Ira to escape. They burst through the emergency exit, and the cold night air hits their faces like a wave of relief. They've made it. But they don't stop. They run, feet pounding against the pavement, until the lights of the lab fade into the distance. Hours later, Elisa and Ira find themselves in a secluded area outside the city, far from the pursuit of the lab. The moon is high in the sky, casting a soft, silver light over the landscape. The air is crisp, and the world feels vast and empty, like a dream unfolding. Ira looks at the horizon, her eyes distant, as if searching for something. Elisa stands beside her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing in on him. They are free for now, but freedom, like everything else, has its price. Elisa turns to Ira, his heart heavy with the unspoken words between them. He knows what she must be feeling, the longing for her home, the pull of the stars. She is an alien, a being from another world, and no matter how much they have come to understand each other, they come from different places, different realities. They cannot stay together. Ira must return to her planet. Ira takes a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, though her expression remains calm, composed. She reaches out, and Elisa gently places his hand in hers. The touch is warm, but there's an underlying sadness in it, a silent recognition of the distance between them, both physical and emotional. For a moment, they simply stand there, hand in hand, in the quiet of the night. There is no need for words. The silence between them speaks volumes, filled with love, sorrow, and understanding. They know that their paths must part here, at this very moment. Ira gives him one final, lingering look. Her eyes shine with gratitude, and despite the sadness, there is peace in them, a peace that only comes when two souls have truly connected. She smiles softly, though the sadness in her eyes betrays the pain of the inevitable separation. Elisa, his throat tight with emotion, nods slowly, accepting the truth they both knew from the start. His hand tightens around hers for a brief moment, and then, with a silent farewell, Ira pulls away and steps toward the horizon. The sky above them, filled with countless stars, feels like her home, calling her back. Elisa watches her, standing still as she fades into the night, knowing that this is the last time he will see her. His heart aches, but there is a quiet sense of resolution within him. He has helped her find freedom, and in doing so, he has found something more valuable than any words could express: connection. As Ira disappears into the distance, Elisa stands alone, gazing up at the stars. For the first time, he doesn't feel lost anymore. The journey has been painful, but he has found what he was searching for: a bond that will remain with him forever, even in the silence. The ocean stretches out before him, vast and endless, a dark expanse where the waves whisper secrets that only the wind can understand. Elisa stands on the shore, his feet buried in the cool sand, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of salt water, and the sky above is streaked with the fading colors of the setting sun. Yet, despite the beauty of the scene, there is a heaviness in Elisa's chest, an ache that will not fade. His gaze follows the faint outline of a spaceship ascending into the night sky, its lights flickering like distant stars as it rises higher, farther, toward a place Elisa can never reach. Ira is gone. The woman he saved, the one who had become a silent part of his life, is now flying back to her home, to the world where she belongs. Elisa watches the ship grow smaller, until it is nothing more than a speck against the infinite expanse of space. It is the end of their journey together, but Elisa doesn't feel anger or resentment. Instead, there is a quiet understanding. His heart aches with the loss, but beneath that ache lies something else, something he never expected to find in the silence of their brief but profound connection: hope. Ira has left, yes, but the love they shared, the bond forged in the unspoken moments between them, remains. It is a love that was never meant to be possessive or permanent. It was not about ownership or longing for something that could not be, but about the connection they shared across the boundaries of space and time. It was real, and in its own way, it was enough. Elisa breathes in the cool air, his eyes still tracing the path the spaceship took until it is no longer visible. There are no words between them now, no gestures or shared silences. But Elisa feels her presence within him, like a whisper that lingers even after the sound has stopped. She is part of him, part of the world he never knew he needed, and he is part of her. Their worlds were different, and they could never fully exist together, but that doesn't make the love any less meaningful. His life will never be the same. He knows this now. The silence that once held him captive has shifted, has transformed into something that gives him strength. The love they shared, in all its fleeting beauty, has given him a sense of purpose, a sense of self that transcends his previous isolation. He is not alone anymore, and that truth gives him the courage to continue forward, to face the world again, even if it's without Ira by his side. As he stands there, watching the stars begin to prick the dark sky, Elisa finds himself smiling faintly, a soft, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. The smile is not one of joy, nor is it one of sorrow. It is something more complex, something that belongs to him and to Ira, something that only the two of them will ever understand. Love doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. He looks up at the sky again, his eyes soft but resolute. The stars twinkle above him, and for a moment, he imagines Ira among them, far away, but still part of the vastness that surrounds him. He feels her there, in the silence, in the stillness of the night. Elisa's heart beats a little slower now, the ache still present, but quieter. He knows that no matter where Ira is, the love they shared will stay with him forever. It will remain etched into the fabric of his being, woven into the silent corners of his heart. The bond they shared transcends distance, and though they are separated, their love continues, unspoken but everlasting. Elisa stands alone on the shore, the night stretching out before him like an endless road, the waves softly lapping at the shore, carrying with them the quiet promise of something that doesn't need to be perfect to endure. As we reach the end of this journey, we are left with the undeniable truth: love doesn't always need to be perfect to be meaningful. The connection between Elisa and Ira proves that even across vast distances, and despite all the barriers they face, love can endure in its purest form. But what happens when two souls are forced to say goodbye? Can a love that was never meant to be permanent still leave a lasting impact? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think love can exist beyond the limits of time, space, or even species? Let's discuss in the comments below. Your opinions might just change how we see connections in our own world.